And one of the things that's frustrating to me is how few people understand what money is and don't seem to understand the difference between money and wealth. And they also don't understand where money itself comes from. It's a source of great frustration for me because I hear debates and people talking about economic policy, and I can tell that there's a huge gap in people's understanding of what money actually is. Right now, there's talk about doing, you've heard the term quantitative easing, which is essentially a fancy term for printing money. Just manufacture money, have the printers make money, and feed it out into the economy in a sort of gradual way so as to not create too much inflation or create some sort of economic bubble in the process. And the US government has been using this policy, which really comes from Keynesian economic theory, of supplanting the lack of wealth with the overproduction of money. So that sentence probably makes no sense to you unless you understand what the difference is between wealth and money. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time, and I really wish I had the time to put together like an animation for it to help explain it better. But let me see if I can walk you through it with words. So I'd like you to imagine a time, which shouldn't be hard for you to do. Imagine a time before there was currency, so bills or coins. Think tribally. Think back during a time when humans, perhaps there were still markets, but everything happened in the form of some sort of exchange, some sort of trade or some sort of barter. Like, I'll give you this and you give me that. Now imagine that there are multiple tribes. Sometimes they fight each other, sometimes they collaborate with each other, sometimes they trade with each other. But let's focus on one particular tribe. And you can give it any sort of cultural heritage that you want. It can be Asian, it can be Western, it can be Northern, Southern. Just imagine whatever tribe comes to mind. Imagine this tribe. And this tribe spends its days on a number of things having to do with survival and also having to do with passing on what they build onto their children. So they may build structures to keep themselves safe. They may build systems in which to process their food. They've probably divided themselves as a tribe into different roles and different specialties. And what those individuals learn as part of their specialty, they teach to their children, and it goes on and on and on. And generation after generation, this tribe, because it's making a number of good decisions, is able to survive the elements, is able to survive the changes in climate, the changes in the supply of food that the river or that the landscape may provide. It's able to survive a number of uncertainties because of a number of good decisions that this tribe has made. Now, again, there's no money, there's no currency. It's just a tribe just sort of building itself up and expanding its terrain and the number of its members through reproduction and also through successful survival strategies. Now, imagine that you could speed up the time and see this tribe evolving and taking form into a large tribe of maybe 200 members. And they've built semi-permanent structures. They've built areas for farming and irrigation. They've got all sorts of systems and infrastructure in place. What they have created is a very wealthy society. So that tribe has a lot of wealth. Even though there's no money, they have a lot of wealth. Why do they have a lot of wealth? Because now let's imagine a tribe that is coming from some other part to invade this tribe. And this tribe is much smaller, let's say, and they haven't really invested the same amount of time into their culture, their family, their survival through the same means that this other tribe has. Instead, what they've done is they go from tribe to tribe and take everything. So imagine this sort of sinister tribe of 20 warriors coming in and just killing everybody from this tribe that had built this entire infrastructure over the course of generations, and then just taking it. Well, what have they taken in that moment? They've taken somebody else's wealth. They've taken something that they developed, a resource that they created through their own ingenuity, through their own muscle, and most important of all, through the natural resources, by transforming the natural resources in that environment. So they could be like trees that were cut down and turned into structures, hay and dried goods that were turned into rooftops. They have probably dozens, if not hundreds, of pots and containers. And of course, they've situated themselves next to a particular stream that they've been able to rely on for many years. And so they spent generations traveling until they found a place that was provided a reliable source of water throughout the year, regardless of the seasons. All these trials and errors that this tribe went through is an accumulation of wealth. It's an accumulation of wealth, and there's no money involved, but it's wealth. It's what they have is wealth. And that wealth can easily be taken by some invading or warring tribe who really never had to develop those skills, because they figured as long as they sharpened their knives sharp enough, they could go in and take it away from someone who did spend the time to do it. And then, of course, they would waste it, and they wouldn't be able to pass the knowledge on to their offspring other than the knowledge of how to take wealth away from somebody else. So that is wealth, okay? So I think that gives you kind of a clear picture of what wealth is and how to distinguish it from money. Okay, so now imagine that this tribe just grows and grows and becomes something like a nation, where there are so many people now that the number of people who actually make a good relative to the number of people who exist in that society is a much smaller number, because that society has become so efficient at making stuff that it doesn't really need everybody to be making something. They're a small group of makers and a large group of takers, or people who benefit from what the makers are creating. And so this creates a society that is to a large extent spoiled, for lack of a better word. Or you could say a society that is largely benefiting from all the good decisions that this tribe has made over generations and led itself to become a country. Now, once you have the nation state and the tribe becomes that large, you start seeing currencies coming into play. And dates back thousands of years, when we used to have gold and silver coins that actually had a tangible physical value. And so it became easy to justify trading, hey, a gold coin for this sack of potatoes, So a maker or a farmer is able to produce these goods. He or she would definitely see the value in trading that for a gold coin, even though they can't eat the gold coin, because that gold coin has a value that applies no matter which tribe they go to, because the metal itself is valuable, since it's hard to find, and royalty always seems to love gold, whether it's for the statues they make, or the jewelry, or the way that they decorate their churches, their temples, their palaces. And so there's this high regard for these precious metals. And so the farmer knows that even though he can't eat that gold coin, that he'll be able to exchange it for something that is of use to him, which might be something that he can't produce in his farm. Maybe it's liters and gallons of milk by the milk farmer. He'll be able to take that gold coin and go to the milk farmer and take that and get the milk for his family that he needs, because they have potatoes but they don't have milk, and so now they can make mashed potatoes. So that is sort of the beginning of currency. Currency really was a very valuable thing, because what it allowed people to do is to participate in the economic exchange of life, of civilized life, without actually having to be a producer, without actually having to make something that could be traded for something. So you could simply be someone who offered a service. You could help the farmer grow the potatoes and be given some sort of currency for your service, and then you could use that currency and spend it in a way that would be of use to you, whether it's to pay for your residence, to pay for a particular food you like to eat, and so forth. So currency, it really democratized the nature of the economic exchange between human beings. And it allowed humans to prosper in many ways, because it made everybody, it sort of equalized the playing field for everybody, because everybody now could participate without having to be a creator of some tangible asset that could be traded in. But you have to understand that wealth, the definition of wealth, hasn't changed in this new paradigm. So even though there's currency floating around that is helping people create these exchanges, that the source of wealth is still the same as the source of wealth was before, which is the production and the transformation of natural resource into physical, tangible goods. And so the reason this is important is because if the nation state ends up oversupplying the gold coins and putting more gold coins into circulation, but there isn't at the same time an increase in the production of wealth, then the value of those gold coins will diminish. Now, not true in the case of gold, because gold and silver, these precious metals, have a value that transcends inflation. So what I'm referring to now, this concept of inflation, really mostly applies to fiat currency, which is the paper and the inexpensive metals that we use now, which don't really hold within them, they don't encapsulate the value of themselves. They're really more of a note, like a promissory note that says, hey, here's $100. I promise you that, or the government promises you that this will count as $100, even though it actually physically doesn't. So when you oversupply that particular good into the market, fiat currency, what ends up happening is the value of that currency diminishes. For more on this, I would highly recommend that you watch Freedom to Choose, which is a 10-series documentary created by Milton Friedman, who's one of my heroes and favorite economists of all time. It has some incredible insights and some incredible moments in history that describe how the circulation of the dollar had an effect on the U.S. economy and still does today. So I would highly recommend you watch that series. It's free online. You can watch for free on YouTube. If I can find it, I'll put the link in the description of this video. So I hope that kind of helps explain the difference between wealth and the difference between money and currency. Money, as it stands now, is really there to be a physical representation of the wealth produced by a nation. So let's go all the way back to the tribe. Before there was money, but this tribe had wealth. They had structures, they had pots, they had food stored safely, they had methods, mechanisms, they had systems, they had roles, they had all sorts of cool, inventive ways to help themselves prosper from one year to the next. They had medicines, they had all sorts of cool things they had developed. Now, all of those things, every single one of those things wouldn't have been possible if they, number one, didn't have the ingenuity and didn't spend the time and muscle into taking the natural resources in their environment and transform them into those goods. So if you track the steps for all of this, the source of wealth really becomes with the earth and natural resources. If a nation is in a desert, it's not going to be a wealthy nation. But if a nation is in a place like the United States, which is probably one of the most naturally resource-rich countries on the planet, it's going to be a wealthy nation as long as the people in that nation are smart and hardworking enough to transform that natural resource into a good of some kind. So why is this a source of wealth? Imagine that you inherited a piece of land, and you go to the piece of land, and all there is there's nothing. It's not developed, but it has thousands of trees, tall trees. That land, all of a sudden, has produced for you thousands upon thousands of dollars of goods that you didn't have to use your muscle or ingenuity to produce. And I'm referring to the trees themselves. So each of these trees, if they were to be used for timber, they would the owner of that particular land would be able to get maybe $1,000 or $2,000 per tree. Multiply that times 1,000 trees, and you can do the math and see, wow, there's a lot of money right here just in tree goods. And you can cut them all down, and 40 years later, all that value restores itself, and you can make that money all over again, or your children can. This is why nature and the planet is really the source of all of our wealth, because we're able to essentially take something that we didn't have to invest a single dollar into, or a single amount of effort, or sometimes not any effort or ingenuity, and it's right there. The earth just produced it for us with the energy of the sun, the energy of the earth, the resources of the environment, and it produced this thing that you can immediately turn into something of value to somebody else. So all biggest sources of wealth are like this. So whether it's mining, whether it's oil, anything that you can harvest from the earth, that the earth produced probably over the course of, in the case of oil and mining, over thousands of years. Anytime you can take something like that from the earth, extract it, transform it into a good that is of value to another society or another person, you have a source of wealth. So there is no wealth creation in the absence of natural resources. You can create a little bit of wealth through other means like services and goods that you produce with the resources that are extracted, but it's not really, that is more of a wealth transfer than it is a creation of wealth, like an actual production, a wellspring of wealth. Because you're not actually generating money from thin air, essentially. And this is largely why nations, even today, are kind of involved in sort of territorial warfare. You know about the United States and its involvement in foreign affairs and other countries. It's largely because in order for nations to build wealth and create wealth, they need the earth as a resource. And that is fundamentally where most of our wealth comes from. Now, lately there's talk about wanting to solve the problem of wealth by force redistributing money, really. But even worse than that, taking what are these sources of wealth and nationalizing them and having the government be in charge. And the reason for that, and it happens in a lot of socialist countries or communist countries, is that governments tend to be pretty greedy and they want to develop their own wealth, which is why countries, for example, like Chile, has nationalized most of their mining, because that is the biggest natural resource that the country has. And so in order for the country to develop the wealth it needs to allow itself to have the kind of military and defense that it has nationalized most of the mining so that it can essentially profit from most of the wealth generated from those natural resources. Now, once those natural resources enter the market and get exchanged for money, that money begins to circulate. And just through all the people involved in the transaction. You know, it could be from the miners, the truckers, the restaurants that are nearby, helping those people stay fed. All that wealth that gets transformed into some sort of fiat currency ends up breaking itself into the community and helping the community, the wealth of the whole community, sort of rise up. And so it's kind of like that saying, a rising tide lifts all ships. If you find a new natural resource, it happens time and again. When a country finds a new natural resource and it taps into it, then that entire community all of a sudden starts to grow and expand. You start seeing buildings, skyscrapers, families multiply, the standard of living rises. It's pretty amazing the effect that the creation of wealth has with the creation of money and the general well-being and prosperity of that community. So I hope that that video helps explain the difference between these two things, the wealth itself and money, because as we discuss changes in economic policy, we need to get this straight in our head and understand that there are two different things, and money will never create wealth. It'll never create wealth. And people who think that will only push policies that end up depleting wealth and lead us into a state of want and a state of impoverishment and a state of need. And it's not, you know, if we're going to be pushing for such policies, we should push for them knowing what it is we're doing and not thinking that we're doing something we're not. So I hope that this video is helpful. If you have any questions or corrections, or you disagree with me, please leave it in the comments. If you like it, please share and subscribe. I think this is the message that needs to get out there, because there are a lot of people who just don't get the difference between wealth and money. So thanks for watching. Bye.